The main engine went dead silent just as the ship's bow crossed the breakwater entrance. We were on board the Pacific Trader, a container ship carrying roughly 3,000 boxes. We were inbound for the Savannah River in Georgia. It was a Tuesday afternoon, clear skies with a moderate breeze coming from the northeast. The visibility was good, stretching for miles, but the water conditions were tricky. We were entering on a falling tide. This meant the current was running out to sea, pushing against us, but the river channel is narrow and requires precise handling. I was the third officer on the bridge. My station was at the telegraph, monitoring the engine orders and logging every command in the bell book. Captain Miller stood on the starboard wing. He was a man of few words, 60 years old, with 40 years of experience at sea. He preferred to watch the water rather than the radar. The Savannah pilot was at the center console, giving rudder and engine commands. The helmsman, an able seaman named Davis, stood at the wheel, repeating every order clearly. The ship was moving at about 8 knots. We had just slowed down from sea speed. The transition had gone smoothly. The vibrations in the deck plates settled into the lower, rhythmic thrum of maneuvering speed. The specific hum of the ventilation fans and the radar scanners became audible as the engine noise dropped. "Dead slow ahead," the pilot ordered. "Dead slow ahead," Davis repeated. I moved the telegraph handle. The bell rang. The RPM gauge settled. The ship felt heavy in the water, sluggish, which is normal when you slow down a vessel of this size. We were about 1 mile from the main river entrance. The channel markers, red and green buoys, bobbed in the choppy water ahead. To our left and right, the sandbars were visible, brown stretches of water where the depth dropped to only a few feet. We had to stay exactly in the center. "Midships," the pilot said. "Midships," Davis answered. The rudder angle indicator moved to 0. If you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing. It helps this channel reach more sailors. Thank you. We waited for the tugboats. They were scheduled to meet us further up the river near the turning basin. For now, we were on our own. The plan was to maintain steerage way, keep her steady against the current, and proceed to the dock. The chief engineer called up from the engine control room. He reported that all pressures were normal and the plant was ready for maneuvering. Everything was routine. It was just another arrival. The trouble started quietly. The pilot called for a slight increase in speed to counter the current pushing against our starboard bow. "Slow ahead," the pilot said. "Slow ahead," Davis repeated. I grabbed the heavy brass handle of the telegraph and pushed it forward 1 notch to the slow ahead position. The answering bell from the engine room rang immediately. I wrote the time and the order in the Dodos logbook. I looked up at the RPM indicator, waiting for the needle to rise. Usually you feel a slight shudder as the shaft turns faster and the propeller bites into the water. Nothing happened. I watched the needle. It hovered for a second, then dropped. It did not go up. It fell all the way to 0. The low vibration of the engine, a sound you get used to so much that you stop hearing it, simply vanished. The sudden silence on the bridge was louder than any alarm. "Engine is not answering, Captain," I said. Captain Miller turned his head from the wing. He looked at the tachometer. "Telegraph is at slow ahead?" "Yes, sir, slow ahead." "Cycle it," the captain ordered. I pulled the handle back to stop and pushed it forward to slow ahead again. The bell rang. We waited 5 seconds. There was no response from below. The needle remained dead on 0. The silence stretched out. The only sound was the wind whistling through the open door of the bridge wing. The pilot looked at the captain. "I have no steerage, Captain. She's losing way." Without the propeller turning, water wasn't flowing over the rudder. The ship was still moving forward due to momentum, but we were slowing down rapidly because of the current against us. As we slowed, the rudder became useless. We were a 40,000-ton metal box drifting in a narrow channel. The telephone from the engine room rang. The captain picked it up instantly. "Bridge," he said. He listened. His face remained neutral, but his grip on the receiver tightened. "Understood. How long?" "We are in the channel." He listened again. "Do your best." He hung up and looked at the pilot. "We have lost control air pressure. The main engine cannot start. They are trying to bypass the system, but the pressure is too low to turn the engine over." The pilot stepped closer to the radar. "Current is catching the bow, Captain. We are sheering to port." I looked out the front window. The nose of the ship was indeed drifting slowly to the left. To the left was the red buoy line. Beyond that was the mudbank. If we hit the mudbank with this much momentum, we would stick hard. The stern would swing out into the channel and block the entire river. Hard to starboard, the pilot ordered. Hard to starboard. Davis spun the wheel rapidly. The rudder angle indicator went to 35 degrees starboard. We all watched the gyro compass repeater. The numbers were not changing. The ship was not turning right. The drift to the left continued. "She's not answering, pilot," Davis said. "Rudder is hard over." No response. The captain picked up the UHF radio. Tug Georgia, this is Pacific Trader." A static-filled voice came back. "Pacific Trader, this is Georgia. Go ahead." "We have lost engine power at the entrance. We are drifting port side. What is your ETA?" "We are just leaving the dock, Captain. We are 20 minutes out." 20 minutes was too long. We had maybe 4 minutes before we left the channel. "Chief mate," the captain barked into the handheld radio, "get to the forecastle. Prepare both anchors. Stand by to let go." Standing by forward, the chief mate's voice came back breathless. He had likely been inspecting the winches and was now running to the brake handles. The silence in the engine room stack was disturbing. Usually dark smoke or heat haze comes from the funnel. Now, looking back, there was nothing. The ship was dead. "Shear's increasing," the pilot said, his voice flat and professional. "The current is pushing the bow hard. We are doing 4 knots over ground." I looked at the chart table. We were drifting toward a shallow patch known as the knoll. It was solid sand and clay. "Try the engine again," the captain said to me. I moved the telegraph to stop, then full ahead. I prayed for the kick. The bell rang. We stared at the RPM gauge. It flickered. The needle jumped to 10, then fell back to 0. The starting air tanks were empty or blocked. The engine would not turn. "No good," I said. The red channel marker was getting closer. It was usually distant, a small object. Now I could see the rust on its metal plating. We were sliding sideways, closing the gap. The captain walked to the center window. "Pilot, if we drop the port anchor, will it swing us into the channel or onto the bank?" "If we drop it now, the current might swing the stern into the rocks on the starboard side," the pilot said. "But if we wait, we go aground forward." "Mate," the captain radioed the bow. "Are you ready?" "Ready port and starboard," the mate replied. The distance to the red buoy was now less than 200 meters. The ship was heavy, silent, and moving with a will of its own. The bridge team stood frozen in their positions, waiting for the decision. The only tool we had left was the anchor, but dropping an anchor at 4 knots in a narrow channel carries its own massive risks. You can rip the winch right off the deck. The drift speed increased. The angle of the bow worsened. We were pointing almost directly at the shallow water. "Stand by port anchor," Captain Miller said. His voice was very quiet. We all braced ourselves. "Let go port anchor," Captain Miller ordered. "Let go port anchor." I relayed the command to the radio. On the screen, I saw the chief mate swing the heavy sledgehammer. He knocked the locking pin out. Then he spun the brake wheel open. The response was immediate. A cloud of red rust dust exploded from the hawse pipe as the chain began to run. The sound was a heavy mechanical roar, metal links hammering against the steel hull. "Hold it at 2 shackles, the captain said. 2 shackles, aye," the mate's voice crackled over the radio. We could hear the noise of the chain in the background of his transmission. The mate tightened in the brake. The screeching of the brake lining against the drum was audible even inside the enclosed bridge. The chain slowed, jerked, and then stopped. The ship shuddered violently. The bow pulled sharply to the left as the anchor dug into the riverbed. The sudden drag reduced our speed from 4 knots to 2 knots, but the momentum of 40,000 tons does not vanish instantly. Because the bow was now held by the anchor, the current caught the stern. The back of the ship began to swing wide to the right. We were no longer drifting straight, we were rotating. The bow was safe for the moment, but the stern was swinging directly toward the green buoys and the rock jetty on the opposite side of the channel. The pilot checked the rate of turn indicator. "She's swinging too fast, Captain. The anchor is holding the nose, but the tail is loose." The situation had shifted from a drift to a dangerous spin. The channel at this point was only 500 feet wide. Our ship was nearly 900 feet long. If we turned broadside, we would block the entire river and ground the stern on the rocks. "Engine room, status?" the captain demanded. "Still low pressure, Captain," the chief engineer replied. "We found a stuck check valve on the main starting air line. We are hammering it now. We need 2 minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes," Captain Miller said calmly. He looked at the chart. The stern was closing in on the green marker. The depth there was 20 feet. Our draft was 34 feet. On the bow, the trouble was getting worse. "Captain, the port brake is slipping," the chief mate yelled. "The lining is smoking. I cannot hold it." We looked forward. A thin trail of gray smoke was rising from the windlass machinery. The tension on the chain was too high. The current was pushing the hull with immense force. If the brake failed completely, the chain would run out to the bitter end and likely rip the bulkhead out, or the chain would snap and whip back across the deck. "Tighten it down, mate. Use the bar," the captain ordered. "We are leaning on it with 2 men, Captain. It's not holding." The chain began to jump. Bang, 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 slipping over the gypsy wheel a few lengths at a time. Each jolt shook the entire bridge. The ship was vibrating as the metal struggled against the mud. The stern was now only 100 meters from the rocks. The tugboats were still 10 minutes away. We were alone. Captain Miller made a decision. It was dangerous. Dropping a second anchor while the ship is swinging can cause the chains to cross. If the chains twisted around each other, we would never be able to lift them. We would be tethered there until a crane barge could come to cut us free. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and close the port, but we had no choice. "Prepare starboard anchor," Miller said. "Starboard anchor ready," the mate replied. He sounded out of breath. "Let go starboard anchor. Dredge it. Keep it at short stay. 1 shackle on deck." "Letting go!" The second roar filled the air. The starboard chain flew out. This time the mate clamped the brake down almost immediately. He didn't let it dig in fully. He dragged it along the bottom to create friction. Now we had 2 anchors down. The port anchor was digging deep, trying to pivot the ship. The starboard anchor was dragging, trying to slow the swing. The noise on the ship was incredible. The hull groaned under the twisting forces. On the bridge wing, I watched the green buoy. It was getting bigger. I could see the barnacles on its waterline. "Stern is 50 meters off the rocks," the pilot said. "Rate of turn is slowing, but not enough." The port chain suddenly went tight as a guitar string. The smoke from the brake turned black. "Stand clear of the windlass," the captain shouted into the radio. "Mate, get your men back." On the foredeck, the crew scrambled behind the breakwater wall. They knew what happened when a chain snapped. It would cut a man in half. The chain held, but the ship was still swinging. The stern was passing the safety line. We were 30 meters from the rocks. The propeller was dead still. If the stern hit the rocks, the rudder would be crushed and the hull would be breached. The pilot looked at the captain. "We are going to hit." "Engine room," Miller yelled into the phone, dropping his calm facade for 1 second. "I need that engine now." "Air pressure is rising," the chief said. We are trying." The stern was 20 meters off. I could hear the wash of the current hitting the rocks on the jetty. The water was swirling and boiling around the green buoy. The ship's overhang was actually looming over the marker. We were practically on top of it. Then the motion changed. The 2 anchors finally synced. The port anchor held firm, and the starboard anchor snagged something solid on the riverbed, maybe old debris or heavy clay. The ship jerked violently. The coffee cup on the console slid off and smashed on the deck. The stern stopped swinging. We were 15 meters from the rocks. The ship sat there, angled across the channel, blocking everything, straining against the 2 chains. The vibration of the current rushing past the hull was intense. "We are holding," the pilot said, letting out a breath. "But the strain is too high. The chains won't last 10 minutes in this current." Suddenly the lights on the console flickered. The phone rang. "Air pressure is at 20 bar, the chief engineer said. "We bypassed the safety interlock. We can give you 1 start, only 1. If it fails, we have to recharge for 20 minutes. We were dead in the water, angled badly, with anchors under extreme stress. If we tried to kick the engine ahead, we might drive over our own anchor chains and foul the propeller. If we went astern, we would back into the rocks." The captain looked at the pilot. "We have to twist her, hard to port. Dead slow ahead, we use the engine to take the strain off the chains. If the engine doesn't start, we drag onto the rocks in the next gust of wind," the pilot reminded him. "Kick it," the captain said to me. I put my hand on the telegraph. The brass was cold. I moved it from stop to dead slow ahead. We waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. The bridge was silent. Then a low rumble started deep in the ship. The stack shuddered. The RPM needle bounced off 0. It went to 5, then 10, then 15. The engine fired. "She's answering," I called out. The ship came alive. The vibration returned. But the crisis wasn't over. We were still pinned by our own anchors close to the rocks in a narrow channel with a tenuous engine. We had to maneuver out of this trap without wrapping the chains around the propeller. The captain grabbed the radio. "Mate, heave up starboard anchor. Now, we are moving." "Heave up starboard anchor," the captain repeated. "Dead slow ahead on the engine. Rudder hard port." "Rudder is hard port," Davis said. "Engine is answering at 20 RPM. The ship began to move. It was a slow, grinding movement. The propeller washed water over the rudder, giving us the leverage we desperately needed. The stern, which was dangerously close to the rocks, finally began to swing away toward the center of the channel. We watched the distance open up, 20 meters, then 30, then 40. The immediate danger of grounding the stern was passing, but we now had a new problem. We were moving forward against the current, but we were still tethered to the bottom. The starboard anchor chain was tight. On the bow, the windlass groaned. It is a hydraulic machine, and when it is overloaded, it makes a distinct, high-pitched whining sound. "Starboard chain is leading aft," the mate reported. "Heavy strain." "Keep heaving," the captain said. "We are easing the tension now." By moving the ship forward with the engine, we took the weight off the chain. This allowed the windlass to lift the heavy steel links without stalling. If we moved too fast, we would overrun the anchor and the chain would scrape against the hull paint. If we moved too slow, the current would push us back and the windlass would fail. It was a balancing act. "Starboard anchor is up and down," the mate called out. This meant the anchor was directly beneath the bow, hanging vertically. "Heave it home," the captain ordered. We heard the heavy clanking of the final links coming through the hawse pipe. "Starboard anchor awow," the mate said. The anchor was off the bottom. Now we were pivoting solely on the port anchor. This was the one that had dug in deep and saved us from the initial drift. Because it had taken the full force of the ship's momentum, it was likely buried deep in the river mud. "Stop engine," the captain ordered. "Stop engine," I answered. The telegraph rang. The RPM dropped to 0. We drifted momentarily, checking if the ship was stable. The current pushed us, but the port anchor held us in the middle of the channel. We were safe from the rocks, but we were still blocking traffic. "Pilot, how far to the tugs?" Captain Miller asked. "Visual contact," the pilot said, pointing forward. I looked out. 2 miles up the river, the tug Georgia was sprinting toward us, pushing a large bow wave. It was a welcome sight, but they were not here yet. We had to finish the job ourselves. "Heave up port anchor," the captain ordered. "Heaving port," the mate replied. The windlass whined again, louder this time. The chain did not move. "She's stuck hard, Captain," the mate said. "Hydraulic pressure is maxing out. The relief valve is lifting. The anchor was snagged in the clay." "Kick to the engine ahead again," the pilot suggested. "Dead slow? Drive over it to break the suction." "Dead slow ahead," the captain said. "Rudder midships." The engine fired again. The restart worked. The engineers had kept the air pressure up. The ship moved forward slowly, stepping over the spot where the anchor lay. "Chain is leading under the foot," the mate warned. "Careful." "Stop engine," the captain said immediately. The momentum of the ship tugged at the vertical chain. The 40,000-ton mass of the vessel acted like a giant lever. We felt a dull thud through the deck plates. "Anchor is free," the mate shouted. "She broke out." "Heave away," the captain said, exhaling a long breath. The mate retrieved the chain. It came up covered in thick gray mud, clumps of clay falling back into the water. When the anchor finally broke the surface, it was a ball of mud. "Anchor away. Clear anchor," the mate reported. At that moment, the radio crackled. "Pacific Trader, this is Tug Georgia. We are alongside your port quarter." "Make fast, Georgia," the pilot said. "We are happy to see you." With the tug pushing on our quarter and our main engine finally running reliably, we regained full control. The pilot ordered 10 degrees starboard rudder to bring us back to the true center of the channel. The ship straightened out. The red and green buoys, which had been threats just moments ago, became simple markers again. We proceeded up the river at 6 knots, as if nothing had happened. The bridge remained quiet. Nobody cheered. Nobody joked. The adrenaline faded, leaving everyone feeling heavy and tired. I went to the chart table and logged the times. 14:30, lost power. 14:35, anchors away. 14:55, underway. It looked like a small event on paper. We docked 2 hours later at the Garden City terminal. The mooring lines were secured, the gangway was lowered, and the customs officer came aboard. To the shore staff, we were just another ship arriving on schedule. They didn't see the mud covering the forecastle deck or the scorch marks on the windlass brake linings. Once the engine was finished with maneuvers, the chief engineer and his team dismantled the starting air system. They found the culprit. It was a main starting valve that had seized due to moisture and old grease. It was a small mechanical part, no bigger than a fist, but its failure had nearly caused a massive grounding. They cleaned it, replaced the seals, and tested it 10 times before they were satisfied. Captain Miller sat in the ship's office that evening. He was writing the official incident report for the company. I stood by the door, waiting to sign the logbook. "A close 1/3, he said, not looking up from his writing. "Yes, Captain," I said. "The anchors saved us," he said, "but only because the crew knew how to use them fast. Good work on the telegraph." "Thank you, sir." We stayed in Savannah for 24 hours discharging cargo. The mate spent the day greasing the windlasses and checking the brake pads. By the time we departed for Charleston the next evening, the ship was back in routine. We sailed out past the same red and green buoys, past the rock jetty, and out into the open sea. The engine thrummed steadily beneath our feet, a sound we would never take for granted again. If any of you handled a moment like this in your time at sea, I'd be interested to hear it.